Good afternoon. And happy Sabbath. There is a very good question. Who created God? You know why I'm asking that question? I know that for us it might be a silly question, but there are people, we call them atheists, and actually I can tell you that some of them have a different version of Bible, and this Bible is written by Richard Dawkins, who says, he wrote a book called God Delusion. And in that book, he is doing something, he is just he argues against God, and he argues against intelligent design, and he is using some arguments, and one of these arguments is that there is no intelligent design because we have no proof that God exists, that God was created or originated, and so on and so on. And actually, I can tell you that if you will read that book, there is a problem, okay? Because actually, from some point of view, I can agree with him that there is no God. I can agree with him that there is no God, You know why? Because in that book, he created his version of God, and then he is arguing against his version of God. Okay? So from that point of view, I agree. God that he created doesn't exist. Okay? But I would like to help you to find some more answers to that question. And actually, I can tell you, I cannot prove that God exists. Because if I could prove that God exists, it actually means that everyone on earth should believe that there is a God. If there is a, proof, like 100% proof, then everyone should believe in God, and we know that it doesn't work this way. But we have some arguments, and we will talk a little bit about arguments, but first, before I will even do it, and before I will refer to Richard Dawkins' book, I just have to tell you that all the time, I'm sorry, I know that we have to start from making things harder to make it easier after all, okay? So I will make things harder for you right now. So, do you have, for example, any proof that we are not living in a computer simulation, like Matrix? Have you ever seen the movie Matrix? No, never? Oh, wow. I don't know what to say, okay? But there is a theory that, that we are living, that the world that we are living is just a huge simulation, and it actually means that you can exist, but maybe everyone that are around you doesn't exist because we are like computer program or something else. Do you have any proof that this isn't true? You know what? You cannot prove that this is not true, because if we were living in simulation, the simulation would be created in a way that you couldn't find a proof, right? This is how it works. So we have to be, I have to be totally honest with you, okay? If we are discussing how the world was created, how it originated, we always have to have some assumptions. So my assumption today is that we are not living in simulation, my assumption is that there is God or there is no God. And we have just those two options. Okay? Option 1, there is God. Option number 2, there is no God. That's why we will be discussing only this. Okay? I cannot prove to you that we are not living in a simulation. And the most funny thing is that if we are living in simulation, then you don't care because you are just the simulation and only I exist. I can even tell you something more. If we were living in simulation, it actually means that there is some kind of God who creates the simulation, you know, and he stimulates everything in it and so on and so on. But we don't want to discuss this, okay? We will just discuss if there is God or there is no God, okay? And actually, I can tell you that Richard Dawkins, he also had to do similar assumptions. But the problem is that his assumption is that there is no God. And there is a problem, okay? Because if there is no God, what's the point of arguing that there is no God, okay? Let me tell this in other way. If I could be able to talk to Richard Dawkins and I could show him some arguments that God is true, and I could use scientific arguments, scientific facts that God exists. And because his assumption is that there is no God, in some way he will have to say, okay, I don't know the answer, but I know that there is no God. So hey, if there is no God for him, why is he even arguing? Okay, this is silly. If God doesn't exist, why fight with God? Have you ever met anyone who fight with unicorns? No, there's no need, right? There's no need. So he made this assumption that there is no God, which basically I believe is his first logical error. Okay, but actually he made other logical errors, because in his book that he called The God Delusion, the first logical error is that he assumes that God, if God wasn't created, he cannot exist. Which is a problem, because if he is creator, why do he have to be created, right? Does he have to be created if he is the creator? We will talk about this a little bit later, okay? And the second thing is, actually, there is an atheistic philosopher called Dr. Daniel Kamen from Oxford University, and he replies that every first-year university student of philosophy that can prove that this argument is not valid because we don't need an explanation for explanation. In other words, I will try to make it easier for you, okay? Can I ask you, I will give you the example of that error in logic, okay? Can I ask you, who prepared this bulletin? Ella? So Ella created this bulletin, right? And I will prove that it is not true. Have you ever met her parents, and do you know how Ella originated? Do you know how she was created? No, you can assume how it was, but you cannot prove it, right? Is there anyone who can prove that Ella was created by her parents? Is there anyone here? No? Therefore, Ella doesn't exist. and she couldn't prepare this bulletin. You see the error. There is a huge problem. Believe in that, okay? I don't have to prove that the designer of my phone was created, right? I have the phone, and I know the company that produced it. And that's it. I don't need to prove that they exist. So this is the first logic error. And let me give you another example, okay? Let's imagine that there are archaeologists, and they dig into the ground, and they found some jewelry, some weaponry, and so on, okay? They can do two things. First, they can assume that this jewelry and this weaponry was created during the billions of years. You know, this is how sand worked on it and created the shape and everything, which is crazy because all of them will assume that there had to be some kind of civilization living in that area that created those tools and left it there, right? Everyone will assume that there have to be someone, even though they cannot prove how did they came from, right? We'll always assume this. So, so that's why I'm saying this is crazy. This is crazy. But the other logical error is that Dawkins assumes that God must be subject to the same rules, to the same rules of physics. Okay? And so first, when he is fighting against God, he's saying that God cannot exist in classical physics. Okay? But right now, actually, we have two kinds of physics. Did you know? We have classical, made by Isaac Newton, and the second one is quantum physics. I don't know if you ever heard, I'm sure that you heard about quantum physics, but I don't know how much do you know about this. So I will share some things with you that I discovered that, in my opinion, they are extremely great, and they maybe quantum physics will not prove that God exists, but quantum physics will give us a lot of arguments that it is actually more reasonable to believe that there is God rather than there is no God, okay? For example, according to quantum physics, 80% of the mass of the universe is dark matter and dark energy. And we cannot see it, we cannot touch it, we just know that there is an invisible world, and the mass of this invisible world is 80% of the mass of the universe. It actually means that what we can see is just 20%. But you know that the Bible, actually the Bible is saying that there is invisible world, right? This is exactly what Bible is saying. There is invisible world. And when there is a Richard Dawkins who say that God, we cannot see God, therefore he cannot exist, and he forgets that 80% of mass of the universe we cannot see. And you know, he just decides to not tell about this. But what if God is in that 80% of the universe that we cannot see? Let me put this in other words. Let's say that Dirk have a theory that Pastor Tytus has only one pair of socks, and he is wearing them right now, and he have no other socks. And then he comes to my house. He walks and he takes just one drawer. I have more drawers, but he takes just one drawer. Looking at it, he doesn't find any socks, and he's saying, I researched his old drawer, and there was no socks. Therefore, I have the proof. Pastor Tytus doesn't have any other socks. Did you try any other drawers? No, but I searched this one perfectly. This is exactly what Richard Dawkins is doing. He is just taking a small part of the universe, and he's saying there is no God. And this is crazy. This is crazy. Quantum physics is something extremely interesting because actually we cannot see all of those molecules and so on. We cannot see. All we can see is the effect of quantum physics, okay? So we cannot observe it. We see only effects, okay? And when I realized that, I said, hey, isn't it like God? We cannot see God, right? But can we see effects of his work? Yes, we can do it. We can do it. And I can tell you that I started listening some lectures from quantum physics. I'm not that smart. I don't understand everything. But I understand all the summaries, everything that their conclusions. Okay, so for example, according to quantum physics, we can find some massless particles, and when we have those massless particles, they cannot age. They cannot age. They cannot get older. Okay? Because they are massless. They don't have any mass. You know what the Bible is saying about God? It's saying that God is spirit. Right? You know what does it mean? If God is spirit, he is massless. And he can exist forever. And it is proved by, quantum physics that doesn't prove that God is like that. But quantum physics is saying this is possible. Existence of God is really possible. It's very logic. Okay? Quantum physics is saying that if we could find anything that could move faster than the light, that this item or that person could move into the time exactly the same as we are moving in a space. In other words, if God can move faster than the light, he will be eternal. He will be eternal, and he will be in every time. He will be everywhere and every time. Okay, and actually, this is pretty amazing for me because Do you remember when Moses asked God, "What's your name?" What did he say? "I am." He said, "I am. This is my name." Actually, the name Yahweh that we are using, it actually means I am who I am, I was whom I was, I will be whom I will be, I was whom I will be, I was who I am who I will be. God is saying, I am everywhere and every time. And according to quantum physics, it is possible. This is amazing, you know. I will tell you something more. Quantum physics proved that there might be some molecules or particles, I don't know, is particles and molecules the same? Probably? Okay. I will use molecules because it's easier for me to pronounce. Okay, so the quantum physics proves that there might be molecules that can be in a different places at once. This is amazing, because this is also something that we can know about God, that He is where? He is everywhere. And this is really something, okay? If you don't believe me, this is the experiment who proves that is called double slit experiment. And it actually is also amazing because quantum physicists, they prove that when they are looking at those molecules, they are acting according to classic physics, and when they are not observing those molecules, they are acting according to quantum physics. This is amazing. Do you know why? No one? No ideas? Oh, that's a shame, because there is a Nobel Prize waiting for a person who can explain this. But still, I can tell you that according to quantum physics, existence of God is quite possible. And you know what? For me, this is quite amazing. When I was hearing all of those news about quantum physics, and then I started thinking, hey, but biblical authors, they didn't know quantum physics, and they actually describe God in a way that it is possible for Him to exist according to this physics that no one knows and no one knew back then when they were. So they couldn't just adjust the image of God, you know, to match with quantum physics. They didn't know anything about this. And you know what? When I was listening to that lecturers, I was so amazed because, you know, I was the professor who was telling about this. He was talking about quantum physics, and I was listening to it like it was the best sermon ever, talking about God. Actually, this professor is an atheist. But I remember during one of his lectures, he said specifically, whoever believes in God, and he meant Christian God, whoever believes in God believes in quantum physics. This is what he said. Because the Christian God fits to quantum physics. I'm not saying that God is limited to quantum physics, because probably this is also something that He created. But what I am saying, it actually means that it is really reasonable. There is a place for God in our universe. And we know it And I can even tell you, there is a young guy. He's 11 years old. He is young genius, and his name is William Maylis. At age 11, he got his, I'm not sure if that was a bachelor's degree or master's degree from astrophysics, but he did it in the age of 11. He was 11 when he did this. Actually, that was last year. And because this young guy is a believer, he said that his goal is to prove that God does exist. I don't know if he will be able to do it. But as a young physicist, because he understands the quantum physics, the astrophysics, and so on, I am pretty amazed, because it actually means that this young person also, he saw God into the physics that we have, that we are just starting to know it. So, when we are discussing, who created the creator, it's, just by definition, the creator of universe is not created and cannot be created. So this is what we know, but there are some arguments that we should see. It's not only that Christian God really fits to quantum physics, because there are many other evidences, okay? There are not proofs, but, arguments, maybe we should say. One of this argument is that there is no effect without cause. Can you agree with this? There is no effect without cause. You know why this piece of paper just fell? Because first I raised it, and then I let them fall. There is no effect without cause. In other words, if there is no God, we have to believe that the universe, do you know how big is visible universe that we can observe? 93 billions of light years. It's big, okay? So the whole universe, if there is no God, okay, we have to believe that on the beginning there was nothing. And that nothing, you know what nothing is? Nothing is nothing, okay? So on the beginning there was nothing, and nothing, for no reason, exploded and created all the matter in the whole universe. I don't have that big faith. I just cannot believe this. And I can tell you something more. According to physicists, if everything showed up because of Big Bang, it actually means that somewhere there have to be, our universe is created from matter, and somewhere there had to be the same amount of antimatter. And it cannot touch the matter, because if antimatter touches the matter, it annihilates. Okay? So somewhere there have to be the same amount of antimatter, And you know what? If someone like Richard Dawkins is saying that I am stupid because I believe that God created everything, and he believes that nothing can explode for no reason and create everything, then you know what? I might be stupid. But in my opinion, I am not the one who's stupid. This is really, something for me. And other arguments. And this is something that we can observe. Have you ever tried to explode something? I believe that this is something that sometimes young men, they are doing, right? Have you ever caused any explosion? Yeah, there is John. Me too. I was doing this. I loved this. And you know what I discovered? That it doesn't matter how many explosions I made, I couldn't create anything. Because big explosion can cause big mess, not the whole universe. And I can tell you something more. There is a law of entropy, and according to that law, everything is going worse and worse, not better and better. So there had to be, on the beginning, there had to be someone who put everything in correct order. There had to be someone, because it couldn't just, showed because of the Big Bang. And you know what? Sometimes, this is funny. Sometimes I am, hearing these arguments about those geological layers, and they are saying that, the lower layer, it means that it is older layer, and that's why in this lower layer we are finding some small organisms, and they evolved, and the higher layer there is, the bigger animals, and so on and so on, and that's how we can see the whole evolution in the ground. But you know what is the problem with that argument? The problem is that all of those geological layers, it's hard to find geological layers that works with the evolution. Because sometimes we are finding, the dinosaurs' bones in the lower layers. So you know what the archaeologists that, those atheistic archaeologists, what they are saying? Oh, they are saying that this is because this younger layer slipped down the older layer, and that's how it mixed up. And you know what? Once again, I don't have that huge imagination to believe in this. I don't have enough faith to believe that there is no God. I don't have enough faith to believe that, for example, that during the evolution, two identical organisms that were multiplying themselves by, multiplying their cells, that suddenly two identical organisms mutate in exactly the same way, and they are starting sexual reproduction. Do you know what I mean? They had to mutate in the same place, in exactly the same time, and in exactly the same way, because if we have sexual reproduction, it means that there had to be two organisms that work together to, to procreate. So they are saying two identical organisms mutated in the same place, in the same time, and it worked. This is crazy. I would like to say even more. There is a professor, actually he died, so there was a professor, Anthony Flew, and for more than 40 years of his work, he was creating atheistic philosophy based on evolution. So during his 40 years of his job, all the atheists, they were reading his books and they were saying, oh yeah, this is a smart guy, very wise, very wise. And after 40 years of trying to prove that evolution can be true, after 40 years, he said, it is impossible. And he wrote a book, There Is God. This is amazing. Anthony Flew, he is deist, so he doesn't believe, in the same God. He believes that God created everything and he left us and so on and so on. That's okay. But actually, he just proved by looking at the DNA that it is impossible because DNA code is so precise that it works exactly like when computer designers are doing their works, when they are writing their programs and so on and so on. They are using similar code to DNA. And if we are creating, computer programs, and he said, our DNA had to be designed because it's too precise. And when we are talking about DNA, I'm not sure if I ever told you this, but this is amazing. Did you know that all snakes have a dormant genes of having limbs? Did you know? I told this. Okay. This is amazing because, of course, evolutionists, they will say, oh yeah, because obviously it is easier to crawl on your belly than use your limbs. This is crazy. But when we read the Bible, you know that sometimes there are a lot of Christians, they are reading the Bible and they are saying that the first 11 chapters, they are not literal. That this is just some kind of story that was made up, that was just the way how they imagined this and so on and so on. But if this story from Genesis chapter 3, if that story was made up, can you explain why snakes have genes of having limbs? But those genes are once again? Dormant, yes. Usually I am highlighting those hard words. I didn't do it with this one, sorry. The Bible explains it, and nothing else does, okay? And I can tell you something more. I will not explain it to you right now. If you are interested in that topic, I would recommend you to watch on YouTube the movie that is called Fingerprints of Creation by Robert Gentry. And this is one of, that movie it's about 30 minutes long. So I will not be able to explain it to you right now, but you can watch it, and please do it. Fingerprints of Creation by Robert Gentry. 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 Yeah. And in that movie, he explains that the granites on our earth, they had to be created like that. He just proved it, and he did this about 40 years ago. And you know how all of those evolutionists decided to answer him? They answered him with silence. No one even commented it. Because this is exactly what they are doing. If there are arguments that are inconvenient and they cannot prove that they are not true, they will just keep silent. They will just say nothing about this. Let's say, no, there was no proof. We don't believe it. This is what they are doing. They are ignoring the facts. And they are accusing us, the Christian, that we are ignoring the facts. And you know what? When a theistic professor is saying you that as a Christian you are ignoring the facts, then you know that you are not you can tell him that you are not ignoring the facts, you are just ignoring his interpretation of facts. Because this is exactly what we are doing. They assumed that there is no God, and they have to do everything to prove that there is no God. But we as a people who believe in God, we see the same facts, but we are interpreting them in a little bit different way. And the Bible says, "For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who hold the truth in unrighteousness, because that which may be known of God is manifest in them, for God hath showed it into them. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, is that they are without excuse. Because that when they knew God, when they knew God, they glorified him not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened, professing themselves to be wise, but they became fools." We see the same world. We see the same facts, but we are interpreting them in a different way. And that's why this is really amazing, because if there is God, I can tell you everything is so clear. If there is God, then the Bible is true. If the Bible is true, then we know what is good and what is bad. If the Bible is true, and if there is God, then we know that this life is not all we have. We know that we are going to spend eternity with God. We just know everything. We just can trust. We have totally different life. And you know what? I just can tell you, when I started listening those lectures by Professor Dragan, this is the most famous quantum physics physicist in Poland. So when I started hearing this, I remember one of his lectures, and I saw that this is very sharp mind. He is extremely intelligent. And when the journalists, when they were asking the questions, he was just giving answers like that immediately. He knew everything. But you know what was the last question that journalist asked him? You can't know. So I will tell you. The last question that they ask is, how should we live? And since that question, he had all the answers. And when they asked him, how should we live? Because he is an atheist, he doesn't believe in God, he just stopped because he has no answer. It was like I almost saw the fatal error in his mind. And he just was looking at this and he didn't know. So after journalists tried to help him, he actually said, well, it depends what is important in your life. He said, if the pleasure is important in your life, then you should take drugs because you cannot be happier than taking drugs, and doing all the silly stuff and then die young. And actually, he's right. If there is no God, and if everything that, if our life is only about having pleasure, then what's the point of doing anything else? Excuse me?
It's all vanity.
Yes, it is vanity. That's right. And he was also right. But if there is God, it means that there is something higher, something above. And we can trust God because He is our reason to live. And this is amazing. I'm not saying that atheists, they don't have any morality. They do have morality. But when you will ask atheists what is good or bad, you know what they will say? They will say, well, we shouldn't kill, we shouldn't steal, we shouldn't lie, we should be nice to other people, we should help each other. This is what they will say, right? You know that this is the book that says exactly about the same? Their morality is Christian. They don't know it, but it is. And finally, even they have to admit that Christian morality is valuable. This is something that we should stick. But if there is no God, then actually I can tell you Professor Dragan was right. Let's drink, let's take drugs, let's do everything, because you know what? According to Professor Dragan, we are just a bunch of proteins that evolved during the billions of years. If we are just the proteins, then human life means nothing, and our lives means nothing. But if there is God, it means everything. Because you know what? Because Jesus came to this world and He gave His life to save us, not to save a bunch of proteins, in my case, proteins and fat. But he died, He gave His life to save us. For God, we mean everything. For Him, we are more important than His own life. And you know why? This is why I choose to believe in God. And I know that my faith, I may not prove that God exists, but I know that my faith is reasonable. And I know that it is better to be a Christian, to believe in God, than not doing this. Christ saved us all, because for Him we mean everything. Amen.